Allison, can you talk him into coming up here again? He looks younger and younger, doesn't he? All right, I'll wait.
So first panel is Thompson.
Yeah, she don't want me to go in yet. Love that. Rules Committee will come to order, and good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today, the Rules Committee will consider H.R. 2647, the Resilient Federal Forest Act of 2015, and H.R. 5, the Student Success Act. First, the committee will consider H.R. 2647. Millions of acres of forest face the threat of wildfires that impact wildlife habitats, property, and human life. It's also an asset of the American people, and we're worried about it. This bill seeks to make our federal forests resilient by providing tools to help the United States Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management manage our forests and combat devastating wildfires. We're fortunate to have just the right guy who got his master's from Yale University, who's from Arkansas, who understands this issue. Bruce, I'm an Eagle Scout, and we've got others around here who are Eagle Scouts, who, including Mr. Thompson, who probably got their forestry merit badge, who were in the forest and looked at it to get our merit badges, but there's nothing like somebody that knows more about that, and that is exactly what we're going to do today, is to take your advice for this awesome bill that I think is a bipartisan bill. Next, the committee will consider H.R. 5. As you may remember, the Rules Committee reported out a rule for H.R. 5 in February. This week, we'll seek to complete that work and allow more time to debate this important topic of education. We're also going to make a few more amendments, probably in order as we do that. Ideas that will help make the bill even better. The new rule does not make any changes to the base bill. Instead, the committee will have the opportunity to consider new amendments, in addition to those that have previously made in order, which we can further debate and pass this measure on the floor. I'd like to thank and welcome the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Chairman Glenn Thompson, to the committee. Joining him is Chairman Rob Bishop, a former member of this committee. We're delighted to see you, Rob. We miss you, and I'm sure you miss us just as much. And also your able young steed, Mr. Westerman from Arkansas, who will come up and explain the bill to us. I want to thank everybody for their hard work, and I certainly look forward to the testimony today and the other members who have appeared to be a part of this important process. We're delighted that you're here and want to defer to the gentleman, the young judge from Florida, for any opening statement he may choose to make. Gentleman's recognized.
I don't know about that young stuff.
It's young.
But,
it's young.
I'll take it if you say so. No, I have no statement, and look forward to our witnesses, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Judge Hastings. I'll now have our first committee, members to come up, the Honorable Glenn Thompson, the Honorable Rob Bishop, the Honorable Bruce Westerman. If you would please come on up to the table and begin our testimony. I want to thank you for being here. We're going to have to add an extra chair. And somewhere GT's going to, oh, there you go, got one. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to defer first, if I can, to the gentleman from the Natural Resources Committee, the chairman of the committee, Mr. Bishop. Obviously, anything you haven't read will be in the record without objection. Anything will be done that you provide, and otherwise we'll get the rest of your testimony. Gentlemen, recognized. I can hear you, Judge. Okay over there? The red dot, green dot's on, that's what we're after.
Is damn, you found that. This bill is one of those things that is not the end all. It is the first step in our process that we'll probably be coming back with you with some other ideas later on. But this is one of those bills that actually everyone can agree to, and everyone can realize that as soon as it is signed by the President, the Forest Service can implement everything that is in here. It is ready to move forward right now, which is one of the reasons why it was passed in a bipartisan way. In our committee, it was also passed in a bipartisan way in the Agriculture Committee, and I think it's going to have a bipartisan vote on the floor in its behalf because it does so many things in a very logical first step approach to solve some problems. Problems we definitely have to face are the amount of lands that have been harmed by forest fires that we don't have the funds actually to rehabilitate. They have identified 58 million acres of identifiable areas of critical habitat. We are presently fixing about 3 of those acres a year and not the 58. We have to do something differently. We also have to make sure that the Forest Service has the tools that they need to actually move forward and to implement the policies that they can already do, and that's one of the things this bill does. And number 3, one of the problems we've always had is simply litigation, mindless litigation that has stopped the Forest Service from actually moving forward on with the necessity. This is one of the things that's going to put some restrictions on that, requiring some bonds in there to say, okay, if you're going to sue something, you better be ready to put some flesh on the game. You better be ready to make sure that you're going to sue just on what you really think you can win, not just have the fun of suing it. And also to making sure that when we do environmental assessments, that we do the environmental assessments. We don't have to repeat the environmental assessments over and over again incessantly. First time you get it right, and the Forest Service can make that determination. They've done it, and they can move on with it. So these are the types of things. I would urge you to add the manager's amendment that is in there. Some of the amendment would also allow us to fix some of the problems of funding that we've had in the past, and we can do that, which means this bill actually comes from 3 different committees. Not only has Agriculture reviewed it and Resources have reviewed it, but also Transportation and Infrastructure has reviewed it. And we're all coming up with bits and pieces to put it all together so that we can actually do a smart way, an intelligent way of funding for wildfire prevention and for restoration afterwards. We can give the Forest Service the tools they need, and we can also stop mindless litigation that takes place. It was fun to actually have a hearing on this and listen to retired forestry people who were just all over this with this is exactly what we need to do to start moving forward, and then to have the Forest Service themselves. We haven't always had some great testimony from them, but this time they gave great testimony on these are the tools that they need, the kinds of things they need to do to move forward. So it was a good time to have that. I appreciate Mr. Westerman with his background in here as being the sponsor of this. I appreciate Mr. Thompson, who is not only on our committee, but is also the subcommittee chairman on the Ag Committee that also heard this particular bill, and this is the life and breath of his district. So he understands how significant forest rehabilitation, forest restoration, forest management is, and we realize we have got to do a better job than we've done before, and this puts us on the road to doing a better job. So I urge you to do that. I urge you to give this a structured rule. I'd actually ask you to look carefully at the amendments that have been proposed, and let's not reinvent the wheel. Several of those amendments were discussed at length in the committee. They don't really need to be discussed again on the floor with the same individuals involved as were involved in the committee. But I also think there are some good potential amendments in there that should be added and should do it, especially the manager's amendment, which would give us a funding mechanism to it. I'll ask for the entire statement that is much cleverer than what I said to be put in the record, and I think I'm done.
Thank you very much. Chairman Thompson, Subcommittee Chairman on Conservation and Forestry. we appreciate you being here from the Agriculture Committee. The gentleman's recognized.
Chairman Sessions, thank you so much. Thanks to members of the Rules Committee for giving us consideration of what is an extremely important bill, I think, for the health of our forests, the economic health of our rural communities. There's so much good things that come out of our national forests, and we need some help. And this bill has been well developed. It helps when you have a professional forester as the author to really to go after this from a technical perspective. So I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today regarding the role governing the debate of H.R. 2647, the Resilient Federal Forest Act of 2015. As stated, I'm a member both of the Natural Resource Committee and the Agriculture Committee, where I serve as chairman of the Conservation and Forestry Subcommittee. And as a member of each committee, I've participated in the hearings and the markups leading to the development of H.R. 2647. Now, prior to marking up this bill, the Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry held a hearing to, this held actually numerous hearings to review the management of the National Forest System. Members heard testimony from the U.S. Forest Service Chief Tom Tidwell, as well as other key stakeholders representing forestry, sportsmen, and conservation industries. The witnesses' testimony highlighted the need for active forest management to address the challenge that the U.S. Forest Service is facing. This legislation is an earnest attempt to give the Forest Service more authority and much-needed flexibility to address these challenges of process, funding, litigation, necessary timber harvesting, and essential active management. And in my view, this legislation is the next step to build upon the work of the Agriculture Committee did to provide such authorities in the 2014 Farm Bill. H.R. 2647 incentivizes and rewards collaborations with the private sector on management activities. It allows for state and third-party funding of projects. The bill reauthorizes the Resource Advisory Committee, known as RACS, while returning the county's share of forest receipts for long-term stewardship projects. And expanding on our work last Congress, the legislation also provides common sense categorical exclusions, or CEs, for certain Forest Service projects. These CEs are routine and have known outcomes, and with these additional CEs, the Forest Service will be able to reverse the trend of increasingly lengthy and cumbersome NEPA environmental analysis. Delaying management activities makes forests more prone to fire. And the categorical exclusions afforded in this bill will allow for expedited planning and streamlined projects such as timber sales and restoration projects. To conclude, this is a thoughtful, bipartisan piece of legislation, and by passing this bill, we will give the Forest Service more and better tools to manage and preserve our national forests. It has received overwhelming bipartisan support from members of the Committees on Agriculture and from the stakeholders in the forestry community. I support the Rules Committee print and would ask that Chairman Bishop's Manager's Amendment be made in order under the rule. This Manager's Amendment contains several bipartisan provisions agreed to by our committees. Members of both committees have done an immense amount of work to get us to this point. I would ask that you report a rule that reflects this and quickly advances this common sense legislation to protect our national forest lands. And once again, thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'd be happy to answer any questions that members of the committee might have.
Chairman Thompson, thank you very much. Mr. Westman, we've heard a lot of great things. Now the bill's altered. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Sessions, and thank you, committee, for allowing this hearing today on the Resilient Federal Forest Act, House Resolution 2647. It is an honor to be here, and it's exciting for me to get to talk about a subject that's so near and dear to me. In the forestry community, we have a saying that trees are the answer, and I believe when we look at the national forest, definitely trees are the answer. Trees provide many products that are used in our everyday life, but trees also provide oxygen through the photosynthesis process. They sequester carbon. They provide clean water, clean air. They provide wildlife habitat, which creates a lot of recreational activities for us to participate in. And if you look at healthy forest, everybody wins when we have healthy forest, and that's what this legislation is about: how to make our forest more healthy, how to reduce wildfire, and how to put our national forest back in a good position. This bipartisan legislation will give the Forest Service the tools it needs to better manage our national forest, and as Chairman Bishop noted, it will be immediately after its passage. Our forests are no longer resilient due to overgrowth, wildfire, and disease infestation. My bill aims to fix this through proactive and scientifically sound management. First, the bill incentivizes collaboration and speeds up the implementation of collaborative projects. Collaborative projects bring parties from all sides, from the timber industry to environmental groups. It brings them together to ensure that forest management is conducted in a proactive and scientific manner. The bill also safeguards a strong, timely environmental review process through categorical exclusions for 5,000-acre projects and 15,000-acre collaborative projects. These projects must meet the requirements of NEPA and the Forest Plan. Another issue addressed is the no-action alternative under the NEPA process. Currently, federal land agencies come up with a list of alternatives to a proposed action, including a no-action alternative. The no-action alternative does not take into account growth, the potential for insect infestation, or wildfires. What House Resolution 2647 does is it requires the Forest Service to include these issues in the no-action analysis. Forests are not static, they are dynamic. Scientific analysis should not be static. Under Title II, it sets up requirements for salvage and reforestation plans in response to catastrophic events. Dying trees pose a risk to public safety and forest health and should be removed promptly. Much of the timber in a burned-out area loses its commercial value after a year. Handicapping the ability to remove it, what H.R. 2647 does is requires environmental assessments to be completed within 90 days. The Forest Service would also have to implement greater reforestation in burned-out areas. Typically, less than 3% of a burned-out area is reforested. My bill requires reforestation of at least 75% within 5 years. This allows time to replant trees and analyze the progress of natural regeneration. Protections from litigation abuse are included in the bill. The bill requires that litigants filing suits against a collaborative project put up a bond. This ensures that those filing suits have skin in the game. If the plaintiff loses, they pay the taxpayers' legal bills. If they win, they get their money back. Secure rural schools, and stewardship end result contracting are also addressed in the bill. The bill makes important changes to the Secure Rural Schools program to benefit our counties. For example, counties would be able to use a portion of SRS funds for patrols, training, and equipment purchases to provide better emergency management services on federal property. Additionally, counties do not currently receive a portion of stewardship contracting revenue. This bill requires that 25% of stewardship contract revenues be deposited into the county treasury where the project occurred. This is more money for our schools and other public services. This legislation brings in state and tribal governments as strong partners in forest management. Some states have pledged to provide money to assist the Forest Service with hazardous fuels reduction and other projects. H.R. 2647 gives the Forest Service the authority to accept this assistance. This bill would also reinforce the authority that tribes already have to assist in the management of national forest lands to their reservations. H.R. 2647 gives land management agencies 120 days to respond to tribal offers to assist with land management. Fire borrowing has been a big topic and will be addressed in the manager's amendment. H.R. 2647 ends the destructive practice of fire borrowing in a fiscally responsible manner. It creates a sub-account under the Stafford Act specifically for fighting wildfire. This ensures resources get on the ground to put out major fires when necessary without competing for other disaster funds, such as those for floods or hurricane cleanup. Land management agencies will be able to access those dollars only after their appropriated wildland fire management dollars have been spent. This will free up the resources of land management agencies already set aside for thinning and harvesting and end the destructive course we're currently on. Once again, I would like to thank the chairman and the two gentlemen to my right and my left for the work on this bill. These issues are of vital importance to the environmental health and public safety. Our national forests desperately need better management practices to become resilient again, and I look forward to advancing this essential common sense legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bishop, you've been on this committee for a number of years, and I know we sat through lots of fires and lots of what we wanted to know is clean up, and we saw where the problems of the law, where there were beetles or where there were infestation or where there were problems cleaning things up to start back over. Does this help that process that you've talked about for many, many years get us closer?
Yeah, on a couple of different levels. Number one, it gives the Forest Service some of the tools so they can move forward on some of these projects by limiting the kinds of litigation lawsuits that were impeding their efforts, but at the same time, it also helps them with the financial portion if we actually do the manager's amendment, so that they're not taking money from the reforestation efforts and putting that into firefighting, so they're not having anything to actually fix the problem later on, so you don't have this, you don't have the devastation wildfires we have in the future, so it helps with that. Mr. Chairman, I realize the two people on my right here, and it's very hard to get somebody on the right of me, but these two people are, they have all the details you need to know about this. I want to be respectful for every member that may have a question to me, but I do have a conference committee that is meeting at 5:30. I would like to attend. If any member has a question to me, I'd be more than happy to lie my way through
Real
it.
quickly, I was unaware of that. Let me ask to my right, any member of the
I just say, I got
committee
some
that might-
problems with the bill, but I'm not going to ask any questions. I yield back my time.
Judge Hastings? Mr. Polis? No question. Any member to my left of the Republicans that, nothing from my left. Thank you very much. Mr. Bishop, thank you very much. We miss you a
Oh,
lot.
fine, now you don't
We'll-
have any
we'll quit
questions. When
using
I was
that
sitting
right
up there,
and
you
left
always had questions. Now you don't have any questions. I get it.
Thank you very much.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You intimidated us.
Mr. Westerman, you're a professional. You do this also because you have one of the largest forests in the country in your congressional district. And this morning I had a chance to talk with you about fires and water, mostly water, rainwater and things. You know, when the Lord gives us a lot of rain, we get a lot of green things grow, and then when they take it away, you have a lot of fires. We now have a terrible problem in the West.
Right, and not only am I a forester, I've seen these practices in place. I've got 2.5 million acres of federal land in my congressional district, and a lot of these management practices have been put in place, and we've seen the benefits of it. It's an exciting story to tell, and these were done in the name of restoring habitat to an endangered species, the red cockaded woodpecker. We saw down in the Gulf Coast, which is obviously not in my district, the longleaf pine, wire stem grass ecosystem restoration project, and in the Ouachita National Forest, we did the shortleaf pine, blue stem grass ecosystem restoration project. The earliest explorers that came through Arkansas, their journals said they could ride a horse at full gait through the Ouachita National Forest. Thanks to some of these restoration projects, there are areas where you could do that now, but there are also areas where it would kill both the horse and the rider to try to ride it at full gait. But where we've seen these practices put in place, fire danger is greatly reduced. Biodiversity goes through the roof. You get more wild game, from quail to turkeys to deer. And these management practices, when applied in other forests further west, you see the same increase in game species with the early successional habitat. So that's why we've got a huge list of people who have supported this legislation, from all kinds of outdoor groups to environmental groups who are for the trees and are for the forest. And I'm probably saying too much about it, but I'm really excited about what this bill will do when it's implemented on the ground and how it will help to restore the resiliency in our forest.
That's awesome. Well, my dear friend is chairman of the National Tree Trust, Dan Patterson from Dallas, Texas, and he's excited about the bill. So be interesting. Mrs. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have any questions, but I want to emphasize something you said about Mr. Westerman being a professional. I talk to students. A lot of times students ask me what they ought to major in, because they might sometime later in their life want to be in Congress. And I tell people we need a variety of people here. We need people with lots of different backgrounds, because we need representation from different professions. And so I agree with the chairman. Having someone like you with your background is really very helpful to all of us to bring forth comprehensive legislation like this. And I think it's a real tribute to you as a first-year member to have such a good piece of legislation and to have the support of so many people and have bipartisan legislation. So I just want to compliment you on it and say thank you very much.
To come from Virginia Fox, you did pretty darn well.
Well, I'm probably blushing here to hear that from her, but I will say nobody has all the answers. The staff did a tremendous job in working on this, and other members who have had a lot of input from the areas they represent. And, you know, I think we've got a really good piece of legislation that can make a real difference on the ground.
Great. Mr. Polis? No questions. Anyone from the Republican side? Gentleman from the state of Washington is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And like Ms. Fox, I don't have a question. Just couldn't let a colleague, a freshman colleague, go by without some recognition. I sit next to Mr. Westerman in the subcommittee, and I got to tell you that it's a challenge to be seen as asking an intelligent question following a professional forester when the subject comes up. But I do want to compliment all the hard work that's been done. This will mean a great deal to my state as we've seen record-setting forest fires year after year. And with the drought conditions that we're facing, it really underscores the need for improved management in our national forests. And so I look forward to passage and seeing some great things happening. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, you've heard it from this committee. We've, lots of members on this committee have for years and years been a part of the process of understanding, mostly from emergency basis, the things that we do. And the two greatest words I heard today was restoration and management. And I well understand, and GT would too. I remember back when I was a younger guy, Yellowstone burning down. And it became a national debate about whether we should let it burn or stop it. And probably the first 5 days, everybody said, well, Mother Nature will take care of it. And it became obvious to everybody that what it was doing was scorching the ground in such a way that it might not come back for years and years because it damaged the ground and hundreds of thousands of animals were killed. And sooner or later, the national debate quickly said, let's put this darn thing out. I think your management professionals who understand, you know, a good forest and how you keep it healthy is what it's about. I want to thank you very much. We'll take care of getting it to the floor for you. And I appreciate both of you being here today. If you please make sure you leave anything in writing for our awesome stenographer. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other member that wishes to be heard on HR 2647? Seeing none. Oh, gentleman from Colorado.
I do have an amendment on the bill. And I'd like to submit, with unanimous, ask unanimous consent to submit into the record a letter from the American Association of Justice.
Without objection.
For my amendment. Mr. Chairman, my amendment would strike a provision of the bill that is aimed at limiting stakeholder input and has the effect of curbing equal access to justice, both key values in our decision-making process. I certainly respect and indeed support the impetus behind many aspects of the bill, particularly those aimed at incentivizing collaboratively developed management plans and fixing a flawed funding structure for wildfires. The particular provision my amendment would strike really is not consistent with the overall goals of the bill, and for many Democrats would be a poison pill. If the goal is to have as strong bipartisan support as possible for the bill, I hope that my amendment could be made in order and pass. For districts like mine that are 62% federal land, the Forest Service owns huge areas of open space. We use it, we enjoy it. It's relied upon by hikers, skiers, hunters, bikers, loggers, utility providers, water districts, conservationists, and many other interest groups. It is the main economic driver for many areas of my district, in Eagle, Summit, and Grand County in particular. And I can attest to the fact that these groups with the greatest amount of localized, specialized expertise, are very valuable. In fact, more valuable than any other group when it comes to providing operable, broad input into how federal lands are managed. This bill, unfortunately, with this provision that I'm, absent this amendment being adopted, would discourage and limit the depth and variety of public input by expediting the development of management plans. It could effectively eliminate the abilities of citizens, nonprofits, local residents, businesses, and others to file lawsuits against potentially illegal or improper forest management protocols. The courts are always a last resort, But to achieve justice, they must remain an avenue that's available, particularly for those who rely on our public lands. By creating a bonding requirement, which would reserve judicial access to those with the resources, and a prejudicial fee-shifting requirement that would enable the government to act with impunity, we really break down the value of our public lands in our districts. Mr. Chairman, we really need to prevent this bill from being hijacked and, in fact, removing a basic civil right of access to justice, and that would really be an overreach absent my amendment. My amendment will help return the bill to its purpose of improving the planning process around public lands rather than stifling access to the courtroom. Not only is this a bad provision, Mr. Chairman, but it really undermines the core purpose of this bill, which is to ensure we have more stakeholder involvement in our public lands, not less. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment and defend the constitutional right to justice of families, businesses, local leaders, citizens, activists, water districts, advocacy groups in my district and nationwide. I hope my amendment is allowed under this rule, and I encourage my colleagues to adopt it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for the gentleman from Colorado? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak or give testimony on HR 2647? Seeing none, this now closes the hearing portion of HR 2647. We'll move next to HR 5, Student Success Act. I note that we've got at least two members here, the gentleman, Mr. Buck, the gentleman, Mr. Walker. If they could please feel free to come to the desk. I was looking for Mr. Salmon, perhaps, and I do not see him. We're going to continue to search for Matt, but we're delighted that the gentlemen are here. Ken, is this your first time at the Rules Committee? You've been here once before, hadn't you? First time. This is it. Well, good luck. The way we operate here is anything you have in writing that you'll leave for us, it helps our stenographers. We'll make anything you've got without objection. We'll put it into the record, and we're delighted that you're here, and the gentleman from Colorado is recognized. Is that green dot on?
Now it is.
Good.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I appear to propose an amendment to H.R. 5 that would, in essence, reduce the mandatory participation rate for the first 2 years if H.R. 5 is adopted. This is particularly important if the Good Lot Amendment is passed on the floor. That would open up the assessment tools for schools. I got feedback from both charter schools and rural schools in my district that they are concerned with the 95% participation rate in the first 2 years. But if they're allowed to find other assessment tools, they believe they can achieve that rate, but it will take them a couple of years to do that. And so briefly, that's the purpose of the amendment.
Good, good. Thank you very much. Mr. Walker, welcome. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Session, Vice Chair, Chairwoman Cox, and members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to return and talk about something that's important to us, which is the Academic Partnerships Leading to Success Act, or the A+ Act, as it's known. I want to take just a minute and give a little preface on it. A+ Act would go a long way in restoring state and local control of education. It allows states to completely opt out of the programs that fall under No Child Left Behind, and it directs the funding towards education initiatives.
There we go. Thank you. Education initiatives that work for their communities. Under the A+ agreement, states would receive federal education funding in the form of block grants for the purpose and the programs the state chooses to consolidate. No Child Left Behind would remain in force for any states that chooses not to or chooses to opt out. Let me say that again. No Child Left Behind stays in place for any state that that chooses to opt out of the A+ Act. To me, federalism we hear a lot of times, almost cliche, and I think this particular amendment goes beyond
just in the court of public opinion or fancy PR move. The purpose of A+, to me, is to give states and local communities maximum flexibility to determine how best to boost academic achievement and implement education reforms. It also helps to reduce the administrative costs and compliance burden of federal education programs in order to focus the resources on improving academic achievement. Specifically, let's look at the programs. In fact, we've done some research. There's actually over 80 programs that will allow to update that come from the federal. Just to name a couple of them, 21st Century Community Learning Centers, Comprehensive School Reform Program. Now, these may not be bad within themselves, but it may be that some states are more prone or get more success, while a local state may have another opportunity to implement something that works well. But one of the things I think is very crucial on the A+ Act, it ensures that states and communities are accountable to the parents and the public for advancing their academic achievements of all students, but especially disadvantaged children. All of us have family members or friends who are affected by children or students with disabilities. I think it's huge. A+ Act allows any state that wishes to opt out of No Child Left Behind, this is important, to issue a declaration of intent to the United States Department of Education. Of course, the Secretary must approve it if it, and these 7 things, lists programs under No Child Left Behind that a state wishes to combine or merge. Also includes an assurance that the declaration has been approved by the state authorizing officials. Number 3, states that the declaration is good for 5 years, provides assurance that the state will use fiscal control. Number 5, adheres to all civil rights laws. 6, advances educational opportunities for those disadvantaged children. And number 7, it includes a plan for accountability to parents and taxpayers. There's a high burden of proof on the Secretary of Education to prove a state's declaration of intent falls to meet these minimal safeguards. Let me close with the benefits of A+. Restores educational decision making to a state and local leaders who are better positioned than we are in some of these cases to make informed decisions about the needs of their school communities. Allow states to consolidate funding of any, or maybe in some cases all, the programs that are authorized under the ESEA, and finally reduces bureaucracy and increases transparency of student outcomes by redirecting the accountability, as we've said earlier, to parents and taxpayers and not Washington. Part of my responsibility, I think maybe all of ours, is when we come to Washington, is do our best to return not just the power, but the decision-making to the state level. And that's why I believe so much in this particular amendment. It's very easy to get caught up in the bureaucracies, but I believe that most of us in this room even would agree that government is more accountable and more effective the more localized that we get it, and that's why I'm asking consideration for the A+ Act. Thank you very much for your time.
Ms. Walker, thank you very much. Ms. Walker, years ago, I became engaged in the issue of No Child Left Behind because I felt like it was not named properly because it left a lot of children behind. I voted against the act and have tried to the best of my ability to come up with good and better ideas about allowing states and local school boards to be able to make the changes that they needed. I don't know the exact number, but there are a large number of states that have found themselves asking the federal government for waivers, how to do things, how to make things work. And it takes not only time, it takes sometimes years to get an answer back, but it really delays a state and a local school board's opportunity to be able to fashion what they choose to do. And this afternoon, I met with a school board member from the Dallas Independent School District, and he is a very, very bright man. Dr. Edwin Flores is a PhD, MD, and Dr. Flores asked, please give us the ability, the authority, and the responsibility that you talked about. We have really good people, but we have to jump through hoop after hoop after hoop. Every time we think we've jumped through one hoop, to really make something work, we've got to jump through another hoop. And Edwin said, if you'll give us the authority and the responsibility, we will then be responsible for the outcome as opposed to all the rules and regulations that keep us from getting to run the business the way we think we ought to. I was for straight A's, which is what we used to call it years and years ago. I'm delighted that we're having this discussion. I'm for local people making local decisions. But in this business, we're for the 10th Amendment. We're for taking from the federal government, from the United States Congress, and giving that authority to states. And I think that is effectively what this bill has done very, very well. And I think we'll find that education will get better when local people have a chance to make it that way. Lastly, I do have a disabled now, a young adult. He is out of school. Alex graduated this last year. But I will tell you that when Alex was 18, I saw very little necessarily avenues that would be in front of him as he would grow older. He stayed in until he was 21. That guy is not only more mature and thoughtful, but I think stands a huge chance to be a more productive part of what we do in society, and that you included disability laws, civil rights laws, but disability laws in there makes it very attainable for me to understand that I think that local people care more about Alex Sessions than anybody in Washington, D.C., because I've watched them throughout all these years, and whoever's behind Alex, and I know some of their names, but whoever's behind Alex, if they can really help our disabled children and other children to achieve what they want, they would equal also why they're in why they're in the education field and being a teacher. They get into the field because they want to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. And I'm so thankful for teachers. I'm so thankful for their dedication and devotion. But I think if we really love them so much, we ought to give them the authority and the responsibility. So I support what you're doing here today. Mr. Buck, we're delighted that you were here, and thank you very much. I'd now like to defer to our PhD, the great Virginia Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank our colleagues for being here today and appreciate their good work on working to make a good bill even better. But I have no questions, and thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I want to thank you both for being here. I regret the product that's being brought before the committee and before my colleagues, because I don't think it represents kind of the bipartisan spirit that we see, for example, over in the Senate. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the statement of administration policy with regard to the Senate bill S1177, in which the administration commends the bipartisan way in which the bill was being worked on and being presented, and though it's not a perfect bill, that it's something they can work with. I think this bill has become more, has been kind of tipped more in favor of those, who kind of are on the extreme right of the Republican conference, and for that reason, I don't have any questions, because I don't think this bill in its form or anything near it is going to go anywhere. But I think we can do this better if we had a better process, and I regret very much that we don't. And I thank you for coming, and I yield back my time.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, gentleman from Oklahoma. Gentleman, Chairman Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to thank both of you. I missed, obviously, much of your testimony, and I apologize for that. But since John Klein's probably my closest friend in Congress, and I talk to him incessantly about this bill, I think I'm probably fairly familiar with it, and very pleased with the work product coming out of your committee. I know this was a very difficult thing. To my friend's point, I'm not surprised that the House and the Senate have produced different products. That's the way the system's supposed to work. If we get this across the floor, I have a lot of faith in the people that will sit down and negotiate the final product, and I think we'll come back with something that we can certainly pass with a great deal of enthusiasm. But I think this is a very good start, and I appreciate all the hard work in committee. I will tell you, I have the good fortune of chairing the Labor H subcommittee on approach, and we actually looked at your bill, even though it had not passed, as an outline as to where we ought to be looking at putting dollars or taking dollars away. In many cases, you certainly did that. And, particularly, I know Chairman Klein's emphasis on IDEA and getting money back to local school districts so they can actually have the wherewithal to help kids with disabilities, like the chairman was referring to. I think it's one of the really good things we were able to do in our bill. I think where we went triple in that area over what the president asked for in terms of the increase. But again, that was guided very much by the deliberations, by the authorizing committee, which was extraordinarily helpful. So, you know, I just want you to know your bill has already had an impact on funding decisions that are being made by the House, even though it's not yet across the House floor. It certainly was part of our discussion and debate on our committee. So, again, thank you for your good work. No questions. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, thank you very much. No questions. Mr. Polis. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Questions for both of you. I'll go to Mr. Buck first. You proposed that the minimum percentage of students that to participate in the standardized testing go from 95 to 70% for 2 years. My question is there any requirement as to who those 70% are? Meaning, what often occurs is gaming of the system. And is there anything in your amendment that would prevent, for instance, the school from, if they were 30% free and reduced lunch kids, from saying the 30% we're not testing are free and reduced lunch, or the 30% we're not testing are African-American kids, or it's the 12% students with disabilities that are not taking the test, and it's our free and reduced lunch kids. So how can you be sure that, in fact, that 70% is representative of 100% rather than just removing their bottom 30% to appear to test better?
You can't. And I would just hope that school districts wouldn't do something like that. Obviously, I have faith in our education system. I have faith in our teachers and our principals that they wouldn't pull that kind of shenanigan. My goal is to help rural districts and small charter schools in complying with the new law, not to allow a travesty like that to occur.
Well, unfortunately, those are the kinds of things that have historically occurred, and particularly where teachers and schools are accountable for results, there's a natural inclination to try to improve results, and often that can take the form of institutionalizing processes around disqualifying or not having the poorly performing students take the test. So while I certainly agree it's well-intended, and with regard to the compliance burden side of things, there is I believe, a more compelling unintended consequence there in allowing gamesmanship to enter the system, which can lead to very distorted results. So I won't be supporting your amendment. Going to Mr. Walker's, I certainly applaud the direction of improving the flexibility that states have. That's long been the direction that the federal government has been going, first with No Child Left Behind, hopefully with any new proposal. But what I want to ask is, historically, we have paired increased state flexibility with accountability for results. And what's to stop, under your proposal, increased flexibility and coupled with a lack of results, and piling more of our federal money, more taxpayer money, into failing models rather than ensuring with our limited federal resources that we're supporting the most effective models that the states are doing?
Thank you, Mr. Polis. I appreciate the question. My response would to your question would simply be our models are already failing in many different capacities. If you look at some of our testing and our scores and what communities are already being kind of forgotten or left behind, so to speak, to use the former vernacular on the former piece of legislation, this ensures that if we can't trust our states to be able to identify whatever communities or whatever concerns to redirect that money, do we actually trust that D.C. can do that better? That's why in earlier, I just want to kind of close with the thought process. It's a philosophical belief that I believe government is, most of the time, not every time, but a great deal of the time, not only more accountable, but more effective, the more you can get it into the state and in the parents, into the local decision makers. To me, that's where education should be. It may be a fundamental difference that we have, but that's why I believe if I had to take the option of which is the greater risk, I would think the D.C. decision-making is. That's why I'd want to get it back home as close as I could.
Well, again, I don't think we have a disagreement about decision-making. In fact, even more so than states, districts are really the closest on the ground, and even beyond districts, honestly, principals and teachers are the ones on the ground. The question is, again, I think that there's an unintended consequence of not pairing it with accountability and results. So again, increasing local autonomy can be very compelling. Rather than requiring people to meet the requirements of some rigid Washington program that doesn't meet the needs of rural areas or an inner city or suburbia, let the districts, let the states, let the districts, let the schools have the flexibility. But I think that we have an interest as stewards of the money that comes through here to ensure that programs work. And so it's that measuring piece, it's that accountability piece that there's a bit of a conflict of interest if it's done by the same entity that says how the money's going to be spent. So if it's the state saying how the money's going to be spent, they're going to come up with a measurement system that shows that it works. That's a natural tendency of people. That's what they're going to do. Likewise, if we direct them on exactly how to do it, we're probably going to
where'd they learn that from? Yeah.
that pat ourselves on the back and say, guess what we did work. So at some level, you have to have, it's never going to be impartial, but you at least have to remove that direct conflict and say, look, you have the flexibility, whether it's block grants, whether it's increased flexibility under the various title programs, or whatever it is. At the same time, we need to show results. So I think that showing result piece would really improve this amendment.
And I don't disagree with the overall premise, but let me respond this way. Pull an analogy here. If I've been eating unhealthy and I'm gaining a few pounds, I may not have an exact goal that I need to shed 15 pounds over the next 6 months or 3 months. However, changing the diet, changing the integrity of what I'm doing, the exercise, the diet, et cetera, it may not give me my exact measured results, but what it does, it sets me on the right path with the intention and the data to be able to get that. Do I say that we can't, somewhere in the aspect of putting a more of a quantified, I think that's very tough to do at first. However, I think this turns it in the right direction to hopefully get to the place where I believe you and I want it to go.
You know, and the other piece is it's important to acknowledge that there is something more local than a state. And here we can argue states seem local and relative to Washington they are. But, you know, there is a district level relationship. There's also a site level relationship. So in some ways, you know, this runs counter to some other elements of the bill that want to track the federal money to where the student is. And that may be contrary to what the district wants or what the state wants. So it's really a question of where the stakeholders are in education. Is it the student and the family, and is it driven up from that? Or is it some intermediary level of government? And here we're saying, well, maybe it's the state that should have more authority to direct it. But remember, states are less local than both communities as well as schools as well. And while they are 1 degree more local than we are here, they also are generally the one charged with developing the nitty-gritty aspects of the accountability system. And it's dangerous to have the referee as a player on the field. And with this amendment, it would make that referee the biggest player on the field as well. And I think that that's a very dangerous precedent to do. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Any Republican? Gentleman from Alabama seeks time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Walker. I spent 8 years on the state school board in Alabama, and I was the chancellor of post-secondary education for the state of Alabama. So I have a career both as a board member and as an administrator dealing with federal education regulations. And I can tell you there were some federal education regulations that were rational and actually helped us in doing our jobs. And I can also tell you there were many of those regulations that inhibited us from being able to do our job. In many cases, they were not only redundant to what they were doing, they actually stood in opposition to the efforts we were making to improve education in a poor rural state that needed lots of help. When I would look out there during state school board meetings and see the staff that we had at the State Department of Education in a state like Alabama that were dedicated solely to compliance with federal laws and regulations, and I started calculating in my head how many teachers we could have hired, how many new textbooks we could have gotten, how many new curricula we could have put into place if we weren't spending all that money at the state level and at the local level and all this federal compliance. I thought, what a shame. Our federal government, instead of helping us, it's hindering us. Our federal government, instead of adding to, is taking away. So liberating state departments and boards of education, liberating local school boards, local principals, and local teachers is what we should be all about here, because I agree with the chairman. There are many fine people in this town that work for the Department of Education, and I've met a lot of them, and I think the world of them. But there's not a single one of those people that know more about educating the children of North Carolina than your school board does. There's not a single one that knows more about how to educate the children in Mobile, Alabama than our school board does. And we make a mistake here in Washington when we set education policy, and we say, Washington knows best. Washington doesn't know best, particularly when it comes to educating your children, my children, the children in our communities. So I applaud your bill. I think it's a good idea. And I'll say this, when I was on the state school board, I think if you'll check in Alabama, you'll find there was nobody who was stronger on accountability, who was harder about accountability, who demanded more from every level of education accountability. And if I thought what you're proposing was going to weaken our ability in Alabama to impose the sort of accountability standards that I expected, and I had high standards, then I would not be for your amendment. I would vote against your amendment in a heartbeat. I've read your amendment. I've considered it along with my staff in the context of what the federal government can do, and I think it's a good amendment. We have to have some humility in Washington about what we have to do with K-12 education. We don't make up but about 10 to 15% of the total expenditures of the average school system in education. Yet we make up almost 50% of the regulations. Why do we, who only give 10 to 15% of the money, try to give 50% of the mandates? It's because we think we know best and we don't. So I appreciate what you're offering. I hope that it's ruled in order by our committee, and once it's ruled in order, I hope that it passes the House. And I appreciate you, Mr. Butt, for what you're offering as well. I think you're trying to accomplish the same thing that we all are, which is to empower our local educators, our local education leaders, to do what's best for our children as our communities see fit. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I strongly believe that what you said is exactly where I am. I did not know you had that vast experience as an educator. I thought Virginia Fox was the queen of the hill, but I
Mr.
think
Chairman,
I have to-
well,
She's
Mr. Chairman,
the queen of the hill.
Mr. Chairman, will the gentleman yield?
I would yield to the
Just so the gentleman knows, I was also chair of the State Board of Education in our state of Colorado and served 6 years on there. So there's a wealth of education expertise in this committee in the form of Mr. Byrne, Dr. Fox, and myself.
I will stand corrected. There are others around here other than Virginia Fox that can read and write and spell and have dedicated their time to this. Mr. Walker?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a couple concluding thoughts when you're.
If you think it'll help your case, good luck.
Well, I used to train salesmen at some point when you made the sale, know when to shut up. But this is a little bit off topic. First of all, I want to thank you for your heart and passion. I've heard you talk about Alex before. That moves me every time I hear you talk about your son that way. I think that's admirable. And I do take a small exception to the stereotype of Mr. McGovern as far as being extreme right. I'm sorry that he's not here to say this. Maybe somebody can play it back on video for him. I was the first freshman member to pass legislation. I'm one of 3 freshmen that have passed multiple legislation. All of those, each one of those, have been with bipartisan support. I've worked hard in the first 6 months that I've been here to build relationships across the aisle, and I'm very proud of that, and I just wanted to go on record and clear that up. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Yield
sir.
back.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And let me say this. I think it's not just my family. Every single family knows somebody that is very dear to them where God has given us a child that struggles. And, you know, the way I look at it is God made Alex perfect. We're the ones that struggle. And God looks at Alex and so many other millions of our children the same way. And it's an opportunity for us to learn some of what we think are frailties or special people, and he's just a special guy. By the way, he'll be up here in 2 weeks, in a week and a half, so he'll be up here at some point. He likes Virginia Fox too, so, you know, we'll get Alex up here and let him help Virginia out a little bit. Thank you very much for taking time to be with us. Both of you, you made our day a little bit better. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I want to call up Mr. Hulskamp from Kansas. Mr. Hulskamp, I know you walked in late before we'd already start our panel discussion. We're delighted that you're here. Obviously, you know this committee appreciates you taking time to be with us. Anything you have in writing will be entered the record without objection. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you allowing me the time to visit about an issue I'm very passionate about. I do have 4 children in 4 different schools, at least last fall, and one thing I've been struck at visiting with them and their schools and other children and visiting with constituents is a real concern. I think we can all agree on concern about student privacy. Students at whatever level turn over incredible amounts of information to the public schools. And my amendment's pretty simple, Mr. Chairman. I'm suggesting that I'd like the committee to consider, which would require an opt-in for disclosure of personally identifiable information. And I have a letter on my desk downstairs. I was looking at it right before I came here of a student, a 17-year-old girl in high school, who received a solicit from a photographer. She didn't ask for that. Somehow the information for her home address was given, we believe, from the school, was given to a commercial enterprise and solicited that. And so I have that on my desk. I also have a case I heard of in the last few weeks of, and I have 4 adopted children, as many on the committee might know. And some schools actually release the date and place of birth of children and make that directory information. And I don't think that should be happen as well. Some school districts do not release that. Others apparently allow that. And the only way to stop that is to know about that in advance and to go read on the internet or somewhere there's information provided that, oh, this might be out. This is a different approach. This is the student, if they're over 18, or the parents should actually authorize the release of personally identifiable information. And the third story I heard about most recently is from a student who serves in the foster youth program up here. And these are just 3 examples of personally identifiable information that have come out of the schools. This was a foster youth who had been bounced around a foster care system, had suffered tremendous abuse, and was always afraid, and we think finally information was found out where her biological parents, who I believe instigated the abuse, used information out of the school system in order to track her down after they had their parental rights terminated. Those are just 3 quick examples, Mr. Chairman. I know in the past, current law provides some protections. Again, an opt-out proposal. If you know about the information that's personally identifiable, and as a father, I didn't know this till a year or 2 ago, that this information would be out there from the schools. It goes the other way, and it's would allow an opt-in for disclosure of student directory information. I know it's been mentioned by one of your members that, gosh, there are things we can work together on. I think we all agree personal privacy should be critical, that if you're in a school, that personally identifiable, it also includes sometimes date and place of birth, also includes telephone number, also includes address where someone might live, and we certainly don't want that information out of the public sphere. And I'll tell you personally, what I visit with constituents, once that information gets out there, you just can't pull it back. And I know some other folks are working on other bills as a way to hopefully solve this problem, but given the huge amounts of information collected, we want to do everything to make sure that it's controlled, it's transparent, and that the guardian or the student themselves over 18 actually has control of who has access to personally identifiable information. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for any questions on what I think is an amendment that can pull us together.
Mr. Camp, thank you very much. Are there questions? Gentleman from Colorado.
Yeah, Mr. Hulskamp, I wanted to see if you had any opportunity to look at, first of all, I think that the general direction that you're going is very important when we hear a lot of these concerns from our constituents. Mr. Messer and I engaged a process of stakeholders for many months, and I wanted to encourage you to look at the bill that we put together, which addresses these issues. The trick being there's a lot of complexity and nuance to a lot of it. For instance, data that's used for research, how universities have access, for that pipeline of communication between college and high school, and sort of making sure that parents have confidence in the way information is being treated, including, by the way, the ability to have that information deleted, things like that. So, again, I think that this amendment is a constructive part of that discussion for sure, and I would encourage you to take a look at the bill that Mr. Messer and I have put together. which we've not introduced as an amendment to ESEA. I think there was some germaneness issue in some of the provisions, but we are hoping that it acquires enough support that at some point this body can address that, hopefully in a suspension manner. I mean, it should be, I think it's not a Democratic or Republican issue. We all hear about these concerns from parents. At the same time, we also hear about the promise of technology. I mean, you've probably been in classrooms I have where they have smart boards, and there's a school district in my state, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Hulskamp, in Grand County. It's a rural district, and every middle schooler has a Chromebook, and they got rid of textbooks. So, I mean, not only does that save the kids the pain that they had hauling them around, but they've actually been able to engage families in a new way. So there's a lot of promise, but there are a lot of legitimate concerns. And I think it's very important to address them in a thoughtful way. And I would strongly encourage you to take a look at Mr. Messer's bill, and as well as my colleagues on this committee. And if this is allowed, I hope to join you on the floor for further discussion of privacy. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, wish to reply?
Yes, I could, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Congressman's work on this particular issue. We share a concern about and desire for protection of student privacy. And there is a nexus in this bill, or in the law, in reference to military recruiters and dealing with privacy. We do not change that, or I do not change that in this amendment, but we do have that in the underlying bill, which I think establishes a nexus for us to look at that. This, again, puts the information, the ability in the hands of parents, if they're a minor or if they're 18, in the hands of the student to make that decision about personally identifiable information. And I think that's critical to make that distinction. Those studies still can continue. And I do hear back from school districts. I served 14 years in the state legislature, including some time on the education committee. And one thing I do hear is, the complexity of the law. And I visited with a school district, one of the largest ones in my congressional district, a couple weeks ago. And they have 1,800 high school students. They have implemented exactly this proposal. And they went out and they worked really hard. They want to make certain that no information got out that was personally identifiable information. And I applaud their effort, but there are another district that and plenty of others that do not do that. And we want to make certain that, again, if your information's in the school's hands, it should stay there and should be protected. Thank you.
Did that change come as a result of a problem, a reported problem, or did they just review this and them make their own decisions?
In my home state of Kansas, they passed a law about a year ago. Would have been in effect about 1 year ago on July 1st that provides some protections, but the school district chose to go further and require an opt-in for anything that was personally identifiable. Again, there is no requirement to not release the address. No requirement. That's defined as directory information under current law that folks can say, hey, I don't want that out there. But again, that's when you go in to sign up with 1,799 other students. You're in line here and say, okay, here's the school thing. Let us know if you have any problems. Or if go look at the website. Some just provided by a website, but this would be an affirmative that say, hey, I understand, and I'll let you release that information, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions? Gentleman from Louisville, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman from Kansas for bringing this up. On our Subcommittee of Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade, we've worked, in fact, passed a bill, both through subcommittee and full committee, from Ms. Blackburn and Mr. Welch, dealing with personal identifiable information. And it is a growing problem, as we've all witnessed here on the Hill in the past couple of weeks. It was just kind of perhaps a joke in December when a bad movie made by a company suddenly came to the forefront of the headlines because of the theft of some information. But now it is affected through the Office of Personnel Management, perhaps every member who's worked for the administration or on the Hill. So it does become important, and it is critical that we be able to get our arms around this problem. So this is a part of it, and I thank you for bringing it in this bill, because I think it is important, perhaps as important as anything else we do, just as someone is starting out in life, that they begin with a slate that is protected as far as their personal identifiable information is concerned. And I thank you for making it part of this legislation today. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Further questions for our witness? Thank you very much. Seeing none. Thank you for taking time to come before us today. I think that these are important issues and some that we not only need to think about, but perhaps debate further and allow. And I appreciate you taking time to do that today. If you'll leave anything you got in writing for our awesome stenographer. That will help her out.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Polis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several amendments to present. Before I get into the new amendments, I wanted to ask a clarifying point. Amendments that were already adopted under the previous rule, are they now in the base bill?
No, sir.
They're not.
The amendments, let me make sure I'm asked.
Okay, so specifically, Mr. Rokita and I had an amendment, number 124, that was adopted under the previous rule on the floor of the House. And my question is, do I need to get that allowed under this rule and go have it again with Mr.
Anything that was previously
Okay.
agreed to. But we had amendments that we had
Not debated.
not debated, and those will be brought forward.
Okay, so wherever we got,
We're gonna pick up where we left off.
and the ones that had requested votes under the previous rule, those are still rolled under, and we're still going to vote on them, right?
That would be correct.
Okay, excellent. That being clarified, I won't talk about the ones that have passed. I'm going to talk about the proposals that I have to improve the bill. The first one that I proposed is number 132, which would update the accountability. We talked a lot about accountability with Mr. Walker and Mr. Buck, and we all agree that No Child Left Behind's metrics are outdated, overly rigid. I think the problem that many of us have with H.R. 5 in its current form is it abandons provisions that are critical to ensuring equal educational opportunities for many kids. So what my amendment would do is advance a more comprehensive and effective vision of school, district, state, teacher accountability. This new language would expect states to set college and career-ready standards and to assess how well students are doing on those standards. Again, the action's on the state level. But our interest, since our money is at play, is in making sure that the standards that states adopt are college and career ready and that they don't define success downward. It also requires states to set performance growth and graduation rates targets to ensure school improvement for all student subgroups, as well as taking action where student subgroup is not succeeding. I believe that my amendment number 132 would really uphold our nation's civil rights, the spirit of No Child Left Behind, with operable language rather than the inflexible language of No Child Left Behind, and help ensure responsibility to ensure that our students receive a high-quality education. My next amendment is the reauthorization of the Investing in Innovation Act, and that one is number 131, which would support innovative solutions to educational challenges. This is a new grant program legislatively in statute that would award competitive grants to applicants with a record of improving student achievement and attainment in order to expand the implementation of innovative practices. And one of the key provisions of this is we want to make sure that there is a plan to continue the funding at the local level. This is kind of seed funding. This can make things happen, but it is up to districts and, of course, states to continue what occurs. This has been a pilot program, and just so you know how some of these funds have been used for great benefit of students in our state. In Colorado, in the St. Francis School District, $3.6 million was implemented to expand program for at-risk students in 7 schools, including extending the school year at 4 elementary schools, targeting math students at risk of failing at 2 middle schools, and implementing the STEM Academy at Skyline High School that serves a high percentage of at-risk kids. So again, these kinds of pilots under strict accountability rules that we have and strict measurements beyond the standard accountability that's written into these grant proposals themselves can provide with very small federal investment, seed funding for innovative programs that then become sustainable through the districts and states. It's been a terrific program as a pilot, and I encourage my colleagues to adopt this amendment as well, which supports a wide range of priorities for members of Congress, and including STEM, teacher and leader effectiveness, parent engagement, as well as improving standards and assessments. The next amendment is the Talent Act amendment. Now, this is reflective of a bill that I just recently introduced, and the acronym is the Talent Act. As usual with acronyms, don't ask me what it stands for. But we're talking about our gifted and talented kids here, so that's why we call it the Talent Act. Essentially, as we know, students that are gifted and talented are a high-risk group. High risk for dropout, high risk for suicide, and often because they're not challenged in the classroom, because the schools aren't meeting their needs, they become behavioral problems and don't fulfill the potential that they have. What my amendment would do is support professional development programs to help teachers, principals, and support personnel identify and provide services for gifted students. It requires states and districts to include in their Title I plans the steps that they'll take to assist school districts in supporting gifted students, including those who haven't been formally identified as gifted. So there's a process in IDEA, and students can be formally labeled, but just because you're not formally identified doesn't mean, for instance, on one end of the spectrum you might not have some undiagnosed learning disability. So too, it might not be diagnosed that you have a particular affinity or skill or talent in one subject area. The Talent Act and amendment would also direct states to provide greater transparency of achievement data to families and the general public by including information about students who perform at the advanced level on state tests, disaggregated by subgroup on state report cards. We spend a lot of time, rightfully so, talking about how we get those low-performing students, underperforming, up to achieving at grade level. But we should also dedicate time to looking at that advanced cohort. How are we making sure that that advanced cohort isn't left behind? How do we make sure that there's any classroom instruction that's geared to their needs? How do we make sure that districts and states aren't incentivized to effectively not instruct the advanced, knowing that they're already there? That's the wrong answer. We want to challenge all students, and just as, again, rightfully so, we're focused on bringing underperforming students up to grade level, we also need to make sure we have the right transparency and incentives around continually challenging our students to test advanced on the state tests. Finally, the amendment would direct the Institute for Education Sciences to continue research and development activities on gifted and talented students and disseminate best practices that are evidence-based to improve identification and instruction. My next amendment is another charter school amendment. I'm appreciative that my charter school amendment number 124 with Mr. Orquita is already in the bill, so we won't talk about that one. It was adopted previously. This particular amendment, which is number, let's see what we have here. There it is, number 115, addresses the power of school choice to improve learning for all students. Now, we all know that some students and families may feel that the school that they're assigned into, if it's a neighborhood school, isn't serving them as well as it should. They might prefer a different model of curriculum. Perhaps they have a different learning style, learn better in a Montessori school, a core knowledge school, whatever the opportunities that the charter schools in the area provide. And for this reason, charter schools, often supported through our charter school program, which has excellent language in this bill, provide that opportunity to choose. However, some students don't have access to charter schools simply because they don't have the means to get to the school. So remember, charter schools are responsible for their own transportation. They aren't generally part of the district's bus plan unless the district actually chooses to include them. What my amendment would do was address that issue in some small way. It just adds the language to encourage, under the charter school program, states and charters to address any barriers to access or enrollment in a charter school, such as transportation. So for instance, it would encourage a district to include a charter school on its bus route. It would encourage a district, if in my state many districts have transportation mill levy overrides, it would encourage the district to then share that money for transportation with a charter school, so that charter school could perhaps run their own buses if they need to meet the needs of their students. So it doesn't make any of those happen. Again, this is the federal charter school program. It simply adds an encouragement in there to specifically address the access issues that we've had with regard to charter schools. My next amendment, Mr. Chairman, is the Student Non-Discrimination Act. Now, I did offer this last time, along with Mr. Cicilline, Mr. Takano, Mr. Maloney, Mr. Pocan, Ms. Sinema, and Mr. Scott, the ranking member of the committee. It wasn't allowed last time, but I'm hopeful that under this new process, this amendment might be allowed. Every day, students who are either are or are perceived to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, are frequently discriminated against. That can come in the form of bullying, physical assault, verbal harassment, and that's why study after study shows that not only does the overwhelming majority of LGBT students experience bullying, but dropout rates and suicide rates are much higher among LGBT students. In California, a gay junior high student in Grass Valley had his face shoved into a cement floor by another student. Now, that's an institute of bullying and normally would be addressed as a normal matter of bullying. However, when he reported the assault to school administrators, they were concerned and they interrogated him about verifying the rumors that were going around about whether he was gay. In Indiana, a gay high school student in South Bend was bullied endlessly by his classmates. In one case, he was harassed in front of 2 school employees who chose not to intervene because later one of the employees present said, "Back home, you'd be killed for that." So again, we need to have a Student Non-Discrimination Act to ensure that we have the same level of protection. It's nothing different. Same level of protection for LGBT students as we do based on race and gender. And that's exactly what this bill will do to ensure that students can be confident in reporting incidents to their teacher, to their principal, and there is some level of protection for that under federal law. Those are the amendments that I offered. I had 2 others that didn't make it in that I spoke to last time. I'm not going to speak to them again, but I'd be happy to take any questions about the new amendments or the old amendments that I presented.
Thank you very much. Questions for the gentleman from Colorado?
Mr. Chairman, I
Gentleman's recognized.
wonder if the gentleman from Colorado would yield a moment to me. It's
my
not
time, Mr.
it's
Chairman?
not a question, but if you'd yield to me,
I would be happy to yield to
appreciate
the
it.
gentlelady, yes.
I have 2 guests in the room, and I want to take them in to see votes in just a second. And so while we have some discussion, I'd like to recognize Paige Morphus and her mother, Beth, who are here. I think they've been very, very patient in listening. Paige has been very alert, and I want to compliment her on that and thank them for being here and listening to the debate in the Rules Committee. And they're from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and they've been spending a couple of days up here. Paige has had an opportunity to learn a lot, and as I said, I wanted to take them in to see the opening of votes. So I thank the gentleman from Colorado for yielding. I have no questions.
And if it will help, Madam Vice Chair, I would be happy to name my amendments the Page and Beth amendments, so if it will help the committee let them in order.
That's a pretty good offer, that is. Any other questions for the gentlewoman before Paige and Beth walk out? Paige and Beth, thank you very much. Good luck. Gentleman from Louisville, Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if I might ask the gentleman from Colorado, and I appreciate you bringing the amendments. You went through them rather quickly. I guess my question is on amendment number 138, requiring states and districts to include in their Title I plans what steps they will take to assist local school districts in supporting talented and gifted students. Are we proposing in this amendment some additional funding for talented and gifted students?
No, this being an authorizing bill, it would both amend Title II to allow support for programs that help teachers identify and serve gifted and talented students, and also ensure that they're included in their Title I plan. So those are 2 existing sources of federal money, Title I and Title II. We don't propose any additional expenditures other than to say that the needs of gifted and talented students need to be met in those plans under Title I and Title II.
So I guess that's really my question. When we say that level of funding needs to be met, how are we suggesting any means that funding be met?
Well, there's never enough funding, is there? As the gentleman knows, but obviously money comes from somewhere. So this deals with the requirements of Title II, which is the main professional development piece, to make sure that teachers are exposed to identification and working with gifted and talented students. And then, of course, under Title I, our free and reduced lunch program, making sure that school districts, including their plan, how they support gifted students as well as those who've not been formally identified. How the level of funding for those programs under the budget that this body adopted and the appropriations bills that follow would be considered separately. This addresses the authorizing language around those programs.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just like you, I do frequently meet with members of my school boards back home, and of course, they're very sensitive as far as unfunded mandates that might come from Congress. So I am sensitive to that concept, but I do have a family member who teaches the talented and gifted students in a school district back home, and his concern to me is that if you have a student who is perhaps the family is lacking financially, but they're identified as talented and gifted, we oftentimes don't have the resources to put into what is required to keep that student interested and engaged and active in the talented and gifted program. And his concern to me is we don't want to be inadvertently educating the next super criminals in the country, because they are so gifted and they are so talented, and yet we're not allocating the resources to providing them what they need in the educational system. So I am interested in what the gentleman has proposed. I am concerned about, of course, additional unfunded mandates back to our school districts, but I'm also concerned when we say we want to provide for the appropriate education of all of our students. The talented and gifted students sometimes do, say, fall through the cracks, but people say, well, they're talented, they're gifted, they already have everything they need, but they may not. And if we don't meet those needs, society may in fact suffer not just from the lack of development of those skills, but if they put themselves to work at cross purposes to society, that's dangerous also. So I thank the gentleman for bringing this. It's an important concept, and one to which I don't think we devote enough time and thought, but I'm grateful that he brought the amendment forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Yes, sir. Further questions for the gentleman from Colorado? Seeing none, I want to thank the gentleman. Is there anyone further that has wished to give testimony on H.R. 5? Seeing none, this now closes the hearing portion of H.R. 5. Before we consider the rule, I want to briefly take a moment to address our subcommittees for this Congress. We have our subcommittee chairmen and ranking members included, and our new chairman, Mr. Stivers, will chair the Rules Committee subcommittee, Rules of the House subcommittee. I've also consulted with the gentlelady who is giving me the names of her members that she chooses to have. I think it's a strong roster on both subcommittees, so without objection, membership of the subcommittee shall be as follows. Subcommittee on Legislative and Budget Process, Mr. Woodall, Chairman, Mrs. Fox, Dr. Burgess, Mr. Byrne, Mr. Newhouse, Mr. Hastings of Florida, the ranking minority member, Mr. Polis. Subcommittees on Rules of the House, Mr. Stivers, Chairman, Mr. Collins, Mr. Burns, Mr. Newhouse, myself, Ms. Slaughter, ranking minority member, and Mr. McGovern. If there's no objection, so ordered. We will now move to a motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee report a structured rule for further consideration of H.R. 5, Student Success Act. The rule provides that pursuant to House Resolution 125, shall be in order to consider the amendments printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report as though they were the last further amendments printed in Part B of House Report 114-29. Section 2 of the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 2647, the Resilient Federal Forest Act of 2015. Under a structured rule, the rule provides 1 hour general debate, equal divide among and control by the chairs and ranking minority members of the Committee on Agriculture and the Committee on Natural Resources. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule makes an order as original text for purpose of amendment, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee print 114-21 modified by the amendment printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report and provides that it shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against said amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes an order only those further amendments printed in Part C of the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in Part C of the report. Finally, the rule provides 1 motion to recommit with or without instruction.
You've now heard the motion from the gentleman from North Carolina. I'll defer to the gentleman from Washington for discussion about the rule. The gentleman's recognized.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rule provides for further consideration of H.R. 5, the Student Success Act. It makes in order 4 more amendments, 3 offered by Republicans and 1 by Democrats. Further consideration of H.R. 5 will be pursuant to the earlier rule. The Forest Bill also has several amendments made in order, a majority of which are sponsored by Democrats. This is a fair rule and deserves support.
Thank you very much. The floor is now open to amendment or discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
To nobody's surprise, I do have an amendment. I move that we grant H.R. 5 and H.R. 2647 each an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bills on the floor.
Further discussion? Vote now be on slaughter amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Noes have it, noes have it.
Roll call,
The gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, aye.
Excuse me.
We're winning.
We're winning, good.
This is on the slaughter amendment. This is on the slaughter amendment.
I really appreciated that for a
And
moment.
I do appreciate from time to time that we have
I
a
couldn't
very
believe how
mundane
wise
chairman who
they've
could
gotten so
not make
wise over
sure.
Greg.
So,
Good men.
The vote will now be on the slaughter amendment. The gentlewoman has asked for a roll call vote after the vote was not in her favor. If the gentleman, Mr. Halper, will please poll the committee on the slaughter amendment.
Ms. Fox? Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern? Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No, and how is the gentlewoman from North Carolina registered?
She is not recorded at the moment.
If you could please call her name.
Ms. Fox? Ms. Fox, no.
This is a fun day. It's a fun day. Gentlemen, report.
4 yeas, 9 nays.
The motion, the amendment is not agreed to, not immediate. For amendment or discussion.
Yeah.
Is there further discussion or amendment? Gentleman from Colorado.
I want to begin by thanking the chair for the draft proposal, which includes my amendment number 132 with regards to accountability. I have an amendment to the rule to improve it even further. I move the committee make an order and give the necessary waivers for my amendments to H.R. 5, numbers 115, 123, 131, and 138.
Thank you very much. Further discussion. Those in favor of the amendment from the gentleman from Colorado signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it, noes have it.
Roll call vote, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers? Mr. Stivers, no. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Newhouse, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 9 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to. For amendment or discussion, seeing none, vote now be on the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it, the ayes have it.
And a roll call.
Gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? Aye. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Cole? Aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers? Aye. Mr. Stivers, aye. Mr. Collins? Aye. Collins, aye. Mr. Byrne? Aye. Mr. Byrne, aye. Mr. Newhouse? Aye. Mr. Newhouse, aye. Ms. Slaughter?
No.
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern? No. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings? No. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis? No. Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
9 yeas, 4 nays.
Motion is agreed to. Motion is agreed to. The gentleman, Mr. Newhouse, will be handling this for Republicans.
And Mr. Polis for the.
And the gentleman, Mr. Polis, for Democrats. The Rules Committee will meet for the purpose tomorrow to discuss and to pass out the 21st Century Cures Bill, 3 o'clock. This completes our work for the day. Thank you very much. Yes, I was aware of that. What has we had only received this afternoon late. I'm not saying, I didn't say it's late.
Okay.